All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're tackling food safety, and I gotta say, this one hits close to home for all of us, right?
Definitely hits home for me.
Because we're diving into that recent nationwide ground beef recall from Wolverine Packing Co. You might have seen it in the news.
Yeah, it's all over.
Linked to potential coli contamination. Not exactly what you want to see in your burger, right?
No, not at all.
We've got reports and articles piled high here, ready to break it all down.
Yeah, let's get into it.
But before we get lost in all the details, it's important to remember that this isn't just another headline, right? This recall, it's kind of like a detective story. And the villain here, E. coli 0157 H7,
Right.
that's not something to mess with.
No, you don't want to mess with that one, that's for sure.
All right, so E. coli, I know that some E. coli actually live in our bodies naturally.
Yeah, most of them are harmless.
But what makes this strain so dangerous? What sets it apart?
You're right, most E. colis are totally harmless. They're actually an important part of our gut's ecosystem.
Right.
But this 0157.H7, this one's different.
Okay.
It produces a toxin, and this toxin can really wreak havoc on your intestines.
Oh.
And that leads to some pretty nasty symptoms.
So this isn't just a theoretical thing?
Oh, no.
This is a real problem, and it's actually affected people right here in the U.S.
Yeah, unfortunately.
We're talking 15 people in Minnesota got sick between November 2nd and 10th.
Wow, that many.
And the common link, they'd all eaten ground beef
Before they got sick.
before their symptoms hit. Yeah,
Oh, wow, so that's how they figured it out.
exactly. And that's where the detective work began.
Okay.
The Minnesota Departments of Agriculture and Health, they got involved, and they actually teamed up with the FSIS.
No.
FSIS, that's the Food Safety and Inspection Service. They're part of the USDA.
Oh, okay, got it.
Think of them as the food detectives.
I like it.
They got involved, and they traced the outbreak back to ground beef from a company called Wolverine Packing Co. in Detroit.
Wolverine Packing Co.
Oh, okay.
Does that name ring a bell?
I think so.
Now, here's the thing about Wolverine Packing Co.
What's that?
They supply ground beef to restaurants across the entire country.
Oh, wow. So it's not just like a small local thing.
No, this is a nationwide recall.
That's huge.
It's a big deal. And think about the logistics of that, a single source potentially affecting every state.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty here.
Okay, let's do it.
What exactly does this E. coli do to you? Is it more than just a little tummy ache?
It's definitely more than just a tummy ache.
Okay.
We're talking severe stomach cramps, diarrhea, often bloody, and sometimes even a fever.
Oh, that sounds awful. No thanks.
Yeah, not pleasant at all.
And earlier I mentioned that this is a bit of a detective story. Well, here's a clue that makes it even more serious.
Okay, I'll lay it on me. This type of E. coli can sometimes trigger a rare but life-threatening complication called Hemolytic Uremic Syndrome.
Wow, that sounds serious.
It is, and it's often shortened to HUS.
Okay, HUS, got it.
HUS is a serious condition, and it primarily affects the kidneys.
The kidneys.
In some cases, it can even lead to kidney failure.
That's really bad.
And it's particularly dangerous for young children, the elderly, and people with weakened immune systems.
Oh, wow. So it's like...
Vulnerable populations.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is serious stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's talk timelines here. When did all of this unfold?
Well, the first reports of illness popped up on November 13th.
Okay, pretty recently?
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago. And by November 21st, the recall was announced.
So just 8 days later?
Exactly. It might seem fast, but with a pathogen like E. coli, it can spread quickly, so every hour counts.
So for anyone listening who might be thinking, wait, I just bought some ground beef.
Yeah.
Don't panic just yet. This recall affects specific products with use-by dates of November 14th, 2024, or production dates of October 22nd, 2024.
A lot of numbers to keep track of.
I know, right? But there's no need to memorize all that. We've got you covered.
Yeah, what do you have?
We've included links to the full product list and labels. They're from the USDA website.
Oh, that's helpful.
We'll put them in the show notes so you can check them out later.
Nice. So no need to frantically check the fridge right now?
Exactly.
All right, good to know.
All right, so let's say you find some of this recalled ground beef in your fridge or your freezer.
Oh.
What should you do?
2 words. Don't eat it.
Straightforward advice.
Seriously. Even if it looks and smells fine,
Yeah.
toss it out or return it to the store where you bought it.
Okay, makes sense. So how does ground beef even get contaminated with E. coli in the first place?
That's a good question. It's not like someone's purposely adding it, right?
Right. It's got to be accidental.
Right. It's definitely not intentional. E. coli 0157, H7 naturally lives in the intestines of cattle.
Mm.
So during processing, there's a chance, albeit small, that fecal matter could come into contact with the meat.
So even a tiny bit of contamination
Yeah,
can affect a huge batch of ground beef.
exactly. That's all it takes.
This really highlights how important proper handling and cooking are.
Oh, absolutely. It's crucial.
Speaking of cooking,
Yeah.
that brings us to our next point. Heat is E. coli's worst enemy.
All right, time to fight back.
So let's talk burger safety. What temperature do we need to hit to make sure those burgers are safe to eat?
The USDA recommends cooking ground beef to an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, 160 degrees, that's the magic number.
That's the one.
But I get it, we shouldn't just eyeball it, right?
No, eyeballing it is not reliable.
So how do we make sure our burgers are cooked all the way through without drying them out?
That's the trick, right? You don't want to overcook them.
Exactly.
A good digital meat thermometer is your best friend here.
Okay.
Just insert it into the thickest part of the burger and make sure it reaches that 160-degree mark.
Thermometer, check.
All right, we're cooking safe.
What are some other things we can do to prevent E. coli contamination at home?
You know, it sounds simple, but washing your hands thoroughly
All right.
with soap and water before and after handling raw meat.
Before and after.
Yes, crucial.
So important.
Same goes for anything that touches the raw meat.
Like what?
Cutting boards, knives, countertops, you name it.
Got it.
They all need a good scrub with hot, soapy water.
Okay, so no using the same cutting board for raw meat and veggies.
Definitely not. Cross contamination is a real risk. You want to keep those raw meat juices far away from anything else you'll be eating.
Makes sense. Keep everything separate.
Separate cutting boards, separate utensils for raw meat and other foods.
And I imagine those cutting boards need a good wash in between uses, too.
You got it. You want to be extra cautious. You could even use a bleach solution to sanitize surfaces after they've been washed.
Okay, so wash everything thoroughly. Use separate cutting boards and cook that ground beef to 160 degrees.
Got it.
Anything else?
Here's a simple one. Don't let raw meat sit out at room temperature for more than 2 hours.
Oh, that's a good point.
Bacteria love to multiply in that kind of environment.
Makes sense.
Get that meat in the fridge or freezer as soon as possible.
Good point.
You don't want to give those little guys a chance to party.
All right, so let's say you're out at a restaurant and that juicy burger is calling your name.
Oh yeah, I love a good burger.
But we can't exactly control how restaurants handle their food, right?
Right, we don't have that control.
So what are some questions you can ask to make sure your burger is being cooked safely?
Don't be shy about asking how they cook their burgers.
Okay.
You can politely inquire about the internal temperature they aim for and whether they use separate cutting boards and utensils for raw meat.
And if they look at me like I'm crazy...
Hey, you have every right to inquire about the safety of the food you're consuming.
True.
Any reputable establishment will be happy to answer those questions.
Good point. Sometimes I think we're hesitant to speak up.
I know what you mean.
But it's our health on the line, you know?
Exactly. And remember, food safety is a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
It starts with producers and processors, but it extends all the way to us, the consumers.
It's a team effort.
We're all in this together.
You know, thinking about how widespread this recall is, it makes you wonder about the bigger picture. What are the implications for the food industry as a whole?
That's a great question, and one that deserves its own deep dive, but I'll try to sum it up.
Yeah.
Recalls like this, they can have significant financial consequences for companies.
Yeah, for sure.
And they can erode consumer trust.
I can imagine.
It's a wake-up call for the industry.
To what?
To reevaluate those safety protocols and to invest in preventative measures.
And for consumers.
Well, for consumers, it reinforces the importance of being vigilant and informed, you know? We can't just assume that everything we buy at the store or order at a restaurant is safe.
Right, we have to be proactive.
Exactly. It's about understanding the risks, asking questions, and taking those steps to protect ourselves, our families.
And while these outbreaks are serious, they are relatively rare.
That's true.
So we shouldn't be living in fear of every bite we take.
Not at all. Enjoying food is one of life's great pleasures.
It is.
It's about finding that balance between being aware of the risks and not letting those risks control our lives.
I like that perspective.
It's all about balance, right?
All right, so we've talked about the specific steps we can take to stay safe. But what about the emotional side of things?
Well, that's important too.
How do we navigate that feeling of vulnerability when something like this happens?
You know, it's understandable to feel a bit uneasy when you hear about foodborne illness outbreaks.
Right.
After all, food is something we need to survive.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that knowledge is power. The more we understand about the risks and how to mitigate them, the more empowered we feel.
Makes sense. It's like anything else. The more you know, the less scary it seems.
Exactly.
So instead of feeling helpless, we can focus on what we can control, our own actions and choices.
Absolutely. And it's okay to have those feelings of concern. It means you care about your health and well-being.
Right.
Channel that concern into action.
I like that.
Learn about safe food handling practices, ask questions, and advocate for your own health.
Well said. This deep dive has been incredibly informative. We've learned about the science behind E. coli, the complexities of the food supply chain, and, most importantly, those practical steps we can take to stay safe.
A lot to take in, but all important stuff.
And remember, food safety isn't just about following a set of rules.
No, it's about more than that.
It's about understanding the why behind those rules.
Exactly.
It's about taking ownership of our health and making those informed choices every step of the way, from the grocery store to our own kitchens.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. But before we do, we want to leave you with one final thought to consider.
Okay, hit me with it.
Imagine a world where food safety is no longer an afterthought,
That'd be nice.
but a deeply ingrained part of our culture. What would that world look like?
I like that. Something to think about.
And what role would each of us play in making it a reality?
It's a big question, but worth asking.
We encourage you to continue this conversation, to learn more about food safety, and to share what you've learned with your friends and family.
Spreading the word is so important.
We'll be back after a short break to explore these questions and talk more about what you can do to stay safe.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
See you soon. So before the break, we left you with a pretty big question.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
How will all this information about this recall and about E. coli change the way you approach food safety in your own life?
Well, for me, I'm definitely going to be thinking twice about how I handle raw meat in my kitchen.
Yeah, it's easy to get complacent.
It really is.
But this recall is a good reminder that those safety guidelines, they're there for a reason.
Those guidelines are a great starting point, but let's go a little deeper here.
Yeah, let's do it.
Beyond this specific recall, what about when you're at the grocery store, just shopping for ground beef? Are there things we should be looking for?
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely things you should be looking for.
I'll admit, I usually just grab whatever's on sale.
I think a lot of people do that.
So what should we be paying attention to?
Well, first, check that sell by or use by date.
Okay.
You want the freshest product possible.
Makes sense. And I know we've talked about cooking temperatures, but is there anything else we can do at home to minimize the risk even further?
Actually, yes. You can choose ground beef that's been irradiated.
Irradiated?
Yeah.
Isn't that dangerous?
Not at all. Food irradiation is a safe and effective way to kill harmful bacteria like E. coli.
Oh, interesting.
It uses a controlled dose of radiation to eliminate those pathogens without affecting the taste or nutritional value of the food.
Huh. I never knew that, so it's safe to eat.
Completely safe.
I'll have to look out for irradiated ground beef next time I'm at the store.
I think you'd be surprised how many stores carry it.
So we've covered cooking, shopping, anything else people should keep in mind?
Storage. Storage is key.
Oh.
As we mentioned before, keep that raw meat cold, ideally below 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
So get it into the fridge or freezer as soon as you get home from the store.
Exactly. No leaving it out on the counter while you unpack the rest of your groceries.
But what about after it's cooked?
Mm-hmm.
Any tips for storing leftovers safely?
Same rules apply. Refrigerate cooked ground beef within 2 hours of cooking and use it within 3 to 4 days.
All right, so we've got our shopping, cooking, and storage tips down.
We're on a roll.
But what about when we're eating out? We can't exactly control how restaurants handle their food, right?
It's true. You can't control everything, but you can still be an informed consumer.
Okay, how?
Don't hesitate to ask questions about their food handling practices.
Okay.
For example, you can ask if they use separate cutting boards for raw meat and other ingredients.
What if they look at me like I'm crazy?
You have every right to inquire about the safety of the food you're consuming.
That's true.
Any reputable establishment will be happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, you're right. I think sometimes we're just hesitant to speak up.
I get it. But at the end of the day, it's your health on the line.
Exactly. And it goes back to that shared responsibility.
Right. It's a two-way street.
It starts with the producers and processors, but we have a role to play too.
Absolutely.
You know, thinking about how widespread this recall is makes you wonder about the bigger picture. What are the implications for the food industry as a whole?
That's a great question. Recalls like this, they can have significant financial consequences for companies, and they can erode consumer trust.
It's a good deal.
It's a wake-up call for the industry to reevaluate their safety protocols and invest in those preventative measures.
And for consumers.
Well, for us, it just reinforces how important it is to be vigilant and informed.
To take those extra steps.
We can't just assume that everything we buy at the store or order at a restaurant is safe. It's about understanding the risks, asking questions, and being proactive about protecting ourselves and our families.
While these outbreaks are serious,
Yeah,
they are relatively rare.
that's true, statistically speaking.
So we shouldn't be living in fear of every bite we take.
Not at all. Enjoying food is one of life's great pleasures.
Absolutely.
It's about finding that balance between being aware of those risks, but not letting them control our lives.
I like that perspective. Balance is key.
It really is, with so many things in life.
All right, so we've talked about all those specific steps we can take to stay safe.
The practical stuff.
Yeah, but what about the emotional side of things? How do we navigate that feeling of vulnerability when something like this happens?
It's understandable to feel a bit uneasy when you hear about these foodborne illness outbreaks, Food is something we need to survive.
It's essential.
It is. But remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about those risks and how to mitigate them, the more empowered we feel.
And it goes back to what you were saying before, the more you know, the less scary it seems.
Exactly.
So instead of feeling helpless, we can focus on what we can control, our own actions and choices.
You got it. And it's okay to have those feelings of concern. It means you care about your health and well-being.
Right. It's normal to be concerned.
Exactly. Channel that concern into action, learn about those safe food handling practices, ask questions, and advocate for your own health.
I love that. Turn that worry into positive action.
That's the way to do it.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive. We've learned about the science behind E. coli, the complexities of the food supply chain, and most importantly, those practical steps we can take to stay safe.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Literally.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up,
Mm.
I want to touch on something you said earlier about food safety being a shared responsibility.
Yeah, that's a crucial point.
It's not just on the producers and processors, it's on all of us.
We all have a role to play.
So what can we as listeners do to contribute to that collective effort?
Stay informed. Follow reputable sources like the USDA and the CDC for the latest updates on food safety.
Great resources.
They are. And support organizations that are working to improve food safety standards.
And of course, put what we've learned today into practice. Be mindful in the kitchen, ask those questions at restaurants, and don't be afraid to speak up if you see something that concerns you.
Every action, no matter how small, can make a difference.
So true. It's about being empowered and taking action.
Exactly. We're not just passive consumers. We have a voice.
And we can use that voice to advocate for a safer, healthier food system for everyone.
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's a great point. Imagining a world where food safety is just like second nature to everyone.
I know, right? It makes you realize that this is bigger than just us,
Exactly. And it's a shift that's already happening out there.
Oh, for sure.
Consumers are way more informed than they used to be, right?
Definitely.
We're demanding more transparency, more accountability from the food industry.
And that's a good thing.
As we've been talking about all this, it's really struck me that food safety is kind of like a hidden web.
A hidden web.
Yeah, like all these interconnected systems and players working behind the scenes.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And we often only think about it when something goes wrong, like with this recent recall.
Right, when it makes headlines.
That's such a great analogy. From farm to fork, there are so many points where things can go wrong.
It's true, but there are also layers of protection in place.
Like what?
Regulations, inspections, testing, and not to mention the dedication of countless individuals who work really hard to make sure that our food supply is safe.
It makes you appreciate the complexity of it all and the responsibility that everyone involved carries.
It's a huge undertaking.
So what can we as listeners do to contribute to that effort?
Well, first and foremost, stay informed.
Okay.
Follow reputable sources like the USDA and the CDC for the latest updates on food safety.
Good advice.
And support those organizations that are working to improve food safety standards.
And of course, put what we've learned today into practice.
Right, bring it all home.
Be mindful in the kitchen, ask questions at restaurants, and don't be afraid to speak up if you see something that concerns you.
Every action, no matter how small, can make a difference.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really have.
From the nitty-gritty of the recall to those broader implications for the food industry and for us as consumers.
A lot to unpack.
But hopefully you're leaving here feeling more informed and empowered to navigate this complex world of food safety.
That's definitely something we all need to be aware of.
And remember, this is an ongoing conversation, right? There's always more to learn, more to explore, and we encourage you to keep digging, to keep asking questions, and to keep advocating for a safer and healthier food system for everyone.
Knowledge is power. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for diving deep with us today, everyone. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe.
Until next time.